This podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding, TV sucking ideas from our head, public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur, yeah, ride the dinosaur.
Directly
How are
into
the levels?
mics.
Are you checking them?
Yeah.
Hello?
Is this Kurt
Yeah.
Miller?
The Honorable Kurt Miller.
All right, here we go. We're going to start. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indies weekly podcast. We have an action-packed episode, maybe. Either that or we're going to bore you to tears. It's our post-election podcast. Let me go around the table here at the Valley Indies office at 158 Main Street in Ansonia, third floor, and introduce our guest today. We got Murderer's Row here, Ethan Fry, the other reporter. Across from me, not that you need to know that because this is a podcast, is Mr. David Papcin, the chairman of the Ansonia Republican Town Committee. David, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, as always.
And then next to David is Tarek Raslan, the chairman of the Ansonia Town Democratic Committee. Hello, Tarek.
Hello, gentlemen.
And you guys got to speak into that microphone or no one is going to hear anything you say.
All right. Hello, gentlemen. Hello, world.
Am I
And
working?
Also joining us tonight is Stephan Behuniak, the chairman of the Seymour Democratic Town Committee.
Good evening.
Last but least is Seymour First Selectman, joining us from California, where he's on some type of hunting for agents, getting an acting gig. I don't know what's happening. On the phone is Mr. Kurt Miller.
Kurt, say.
Did he hang up?
Kurt, say hello.
No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to have a little fun with you.
So I guess we're going to start with Kurt because of this highly technologically advanced rig we've set up.
We should have done this from like bar none with noise in the background.
So so talking to Kurt Miller, who's Kurt, where are you exactly, and who are you with in California? Just to start off.
I am in Los Angeles. I'm at the National League of Cities. I'm out here with a bunch of mayors and first selectmen from Connecticut.
I saw you and Mayor Loretti from Shelton. It looks like you were enjoying some seaside dinner. What was that about?
Yeah, it was myself and Mayor Loretti, Mayor O'Leary from Waterbury, first selectman Leo Paul, and Joe DeLong. We're actually having a meeting regarding CCM. We have some stuff upcoming. Started working on our legislative agenda, stuff like that. So we figured what better place to do it than on the beach in Malibu.
And can you ask the first selectman if
Which is
Mayor
currently
Loretti's
on
asked
fire
about us,
for
Ethan?
the papers right now.
Is he wondering how we are?
Eugene wants to know if Mayor Loretti has asked about us.
He did. He misses you, and he would like to come on the show.
No
He
idea.
said
who
you
you
guys
are.
never invite him.
I know he's a big podcast guy, right? He'll try to print out this
Huge
podcast.
podcast fan, right? So one of the reasons we're calling you is you just wrapped up a state campaign. You ran for comptroller against Kevin Lembo. Came up short. Just obviously, Kevin Lembo won that race. The incumbent Democratic state comptroller. The Democrats swept the statewide offices. I guess just to start out, what were your impressions of the race? How are you feeling 3 days after the results came in?
I mean, I feel fine. I thought we gave it a good effort. Obviously, Comptroller Lembo, in my opinion, was probably the toughest one of the group to beat. We wanted to make sure that he had a race And I think we were able to accomplish that. But at the end of the day, I think the state of Connecticut wanted to go in a different direction than what the Republican ticket had put out there, and we respond to the will of the people. So I'm very much looking forward to getting back to work, particularly with CCM and promoting our legislative agenda. So I'll just be doing the same work, same lobbying, just from a different angle. That's all.
And CCM is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. It's basically the lobbying group that lobbies state government on behalf of the 169 towns and cities in Connecticut. A lot of statewide races at the under ticket level, you see someone like yourself running and losing, just sort of get their name out there for a subsequent run for a higher office. Do you have any plans or entertain any visions of running for statewide office again?
And is Loretti still going to run for mayor in Bridgeport?
Well, that's two questions. I'll answer the Loretti one first. You'll have to ask him directly. But you never know what Mayor Loretti is going to do. I'll leave it at that. But for me, I got in the race because I was tired of the towns and cities, particularly ones that were run well, having their finances cut by the inability of the state of Connecticut to properly manage their finances. So I have no aspirations beyond this. So I'm looking forward to 2019 and running for first selectman of Seymour again.
And just in terms of like the bigger state picture,
Kurt, the Democrats are here whispering something. I'm not sure what they're saying.
Going into this
news.
governor's race.
What'd you say? I can't. You speak into the microphone.
Is
Nobody's going to hear
Don't
you.
worry,
Is it
Kurt, I got
news
the
that he's
answer
running
for you.
in 2019? I thought the last we heard from Kurt was that he wasn't going to run.
Relay that to him. I don't know if
Those words never came out of my mouth.
Oh.
I said that I was
I think
undecided as to what I would do.
He's claiming
Behuniak's
always said
eyes
he
are
was
just lighting
undecided.
up right now at this prospect.
Just enjoying.
My first term is the only one, so.
Okay, and in terms of just the larger sort of state picture,
What happened to the Republicans?
Yeah,
How
like,
did they lose?
Governor Malloy
the
is
most unpopular governor in the history of mankind.
historically unpopular, and then in the Republicans somehow lost every statewide race.
Well, I think what you saw, there was some animosity out there, I think, with regards to the president. I'm not using that as an excuse. I think what you saw was red communities got redder, bluer communities got bluer. I think if you go back and you look at the breakdown of the numbers, that's what you would see. And, unfortunately for the Republicans, while we generally win more communities in the state than the Democrats do, the Democrats win the larger cities. It's very hard to compete with that, particularly when you're losing 5, 6, 7 to 1 in places like Hartford and New Haven and Waterbury and Bridgeport. I mean, those are big numbers to make up in smaller suburbs. So.
Do you think Stefanowski did anything to appeal to people who live in our large cities? Did he do anything to try to? I mean, obviously that was known going in, right, Ethan?
Do you think Stefanowski tried to appeal to voters in cities? I mean, the demographics were apparent going in, right?
Absolutely. And I think we as Republicans need to do a better job in the cities. It can't be just at election time. We need to have people that are in the cities constantly. That's the only way it's going to be. I think if you just show up during campaign season, you're simply pandering to those voters, and I think they're smart enough to see through that. They want people that spend time in the cities, care about the cities, understand the city's issues, and I think until we start doing that as a party, I think this is what we're going to see for years to come.
Do you think the state? Do you think there needs to be a change of leadership at the state legislature, the caucus level, or the state chairman level?
I don't necessarily think so. I know there's some talk of that, and I think that's going to need to be discussed more in the coming weeks. I don't think we should be making any decisions 3 days after election. A lot of the losses were just weird. I mean, if you go down to Greenwich, a place that Republicans generally win by 7,000 or 8,000 votes year in and year out, Bob Stefanowski won. I won by 1,000 votes, but Senator Franz lost. Lifelong guy. Mike State Rep Boccaccino lost, but State Rep Camelo won. So a lot of those races come down to local. That's one of the things that we tried to stress out on the campaign trail, is that you have to keep your politics local. You have to get out and work for your people, and that will kind of move its way up to the top. And, I think it was just a funky year. I'm going to be honest, I don't think Republicans were going to win this election regardless. There was just too much against what was going on.
Like what?
Do you think so Mark Bowden would have lost this election, you think?
Do I think Mark Bowden would have lost this election? I don't. I actually think Mark Bowden would have won. The problem we have, and this is on both sides, is we're pulled too far either to the left or to the right when we try to get nominations. And, we need to start producing candidates that appeal to not just Republicans, but appeal to unaffiliated voters as well as more moderate Democrats. I think Mayor Bowden would have done that. So it's disappointing that he didn't get the nomination. But listen, Bob went out and worked hard. It's just, I don't think his message was impactful enough to move those moderate Democrats and to sway the unaffiliated voters.
So, I mean, you said Bowden would have won, but then you said before you don't think the Republicans could have won. So, I mean, if they had tried to move to the center and distance themselves from the president, wouldn't that have helped them?
Oh, could have won in the way we proceeded forward. I'm saying.
Okay.
Had Mark Bowden won the primary, I think we proceed forward in a different way, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Anything else you'd want to note or stress? I don't know.
You either just
forgot. Do you think Brody Van Wegeren's going to re-sign Jacob deGrom?
I think he is. Big contract.
Okay.
I look forward to another extremely successful year by the Mets.
Okay. I think that's
at least till June before we turn it off and discuss.
Okay, I think that's a good note to end on. The universal disdain of every Mets fan alive. So, thanks, Kurt, for calling us for a few minutes from Malibu or wherever it is you are.
Oh, listen, I'd love to stay on the line and chime in every now and again if you guys don't mind. If you have the technology to do that.
Yeah, it would not work too well. We've got to make a donation to us, and we'll try to figure that out.
Well, I'm waiting like we talked about at the last one. I'm ready to have my own podcast.
Okay, work in progress.
Hey, if you had won the race, maybe I don't know. We need some big time names.
We'll keep those talks ongoing.
All right, boys, have a good time tonight.
You too. Thank you.
Take it easy, Kurt.
Hey, this is Eugene, most likely interrupting myself to bring you a word from our sponsor, valleygivesback.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what matter to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. All right, so that was Kurt Mello, the Seymour First Selectman. David Papcin, you wanted the chairman of the Ansonia Town Republican Committee. You had interjected something, but we rudely cut you off. What point were you going to make there?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, right into that thing.
Am I close enough now? All right. No, I just wanted to re-emphasize on what Kurt had to say is that Republicans really need to do a better job in the cities, and what that comes to is not approaching these big cities like Hartford and New Haven from a party standpoint, but from a local standpoint, and that's really listening to what the people need, what they want, and I think if they do that rather than just coming into an election and saying I'm a Republican, this is what I stand for, I think that we'll see a lot more better results in the cities, whether or not it means having a Republican mayor of Hartford or if it's just a Republican councilman in Hartford, something along those lines.
One thing that I saw on our Facebook page today, and we're recording this on Friday, November 9th, we put some articles, analysis, or whatever it was from some of the state media, not the state-run media, but like the Hartford Courant and whatnot. And people's reaction was intense. This is from to Lamont's win specifically. Michael Goki, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think what it boils down to is the inner cities like Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford. Those people dictate how the rest of the state live. And there's variations of that many times. Joe Teodoso. Inner cities drive the votes and control the state's future. 160 towns in Connecticut. Lamont only won 48 of them. I wonder what percentage of voters in New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport who don't even work or pay taxes to begin with. Anyone want to take an over-under? So, and that was happening again and again. And I don't know if anybody wants to jump around and react to that, but that's something you hear again and again. I pointed out to one guy, it's not the city, it's just the inner city. It's one neighborhood that does this. It's not like in New Haven, it's only the inner city. It's not like Yale professors voting for Lamont. And I wanted to ask Miller that, but he's...
It's wild how the person getting the most votes wins the election. Crazy.
Weird concept.
So do you
unbelievable,
think,
really.
I mean, in terms of the cities, I mean, you just said how, but what's your reaction? Because you had to heard that before. That's not the first time you've heard a reaction like that.
No doubt. I mean, I've heard this for a while now that Republicans always struggle in the inner cities. Even in some cities where we might have Republican leadership, the towns typically vote to go Democrat, whether it's a midterm election or a presidential election.
But this blame, that sort of...
I mean, there's a sense of blame there, and that Republicans probably could have done more on the issues in the inner cities, looking at, the evolving job industries that these cities are really incorporating, that of information technology, things like
and the other thing is, like, people want we saw this a bunch of times today. Yeah. It's just people who want free stuff, I guess, it's saying welfare, and that's why Republicans will never win.
I mean, I think that's a pretty biased way of looking at it. There are people in the cities that do vote Republican. There's people in the cities that vote Democrat. It's just a matter of how they think their leaders would suit their cities. And in some cases, yes, I think more people, whether you're even in the inner cities or you're in a rural community, suburban community, I think everybody needs to make sure that they're educated on their election choices. Maybe it's not done as well in the inner cities as it's done in the suburbs. Maybe it is, depending on where you are.
Well, do you think... Stefanowski or the Republicans lost the governorship because of the candidate or because cities are just, no matter what, going to vote for a Democrat?
I'd say it's a mixture of both. I think more could have been done from the party to target these inner cities, and at the same time, I think inner cities are pretty bound to vote Democrat just based on trends. So it's a mixture of both.
And then to Tarek or Stephan, I mean, you guys are Democrats. Are you just Democrats because you want free stuff?
Oh yeah, I love free stuff.
What's your reaction? You read some of those because you were in there today.
I'm a Republican. I love free college, but
yeah, sure. So, I without insulting your readers,
our neighbors,
and getting myself into trouble, I will just say that I can make an equally idiotic argument about why Stefanowski came so close. I could say that, it's just the farmers in northeastern Connecticut who just, wanted to sit there with their guns and never, interact with the government at all, and they voted for Stefanowski just for that reason. So should we allow our state to be that close to being red because of that? No, it's a stupid argument, just like it's a stupid argument that the inner cities dictate everything. Lamont got more votes, Democrats got more votes up and down the line. And that's why they won. Every person got one vote, and the people who chose to vote, more of them went for Lamont than Stefanowski. It doesn't matter where they came from; they all came from Connecticut.
Yeah, there's no electoral.
More people live in the cities. That's it, frankly.
But it's not just a city phenomenon either. I mean, it's really, it's the same sort of divide that you see in the rest of the country, which is you have more densely populated economic centers going more progressive in their politics, and then you have more rural, working class, sections of the country and in Connecticut that are trending more Republican. That trend holds true pretty much throughout the country. It's true in the reddest state in the country. It's true in the bluest state in the country. You have Republican candidates getting elected in California, and you have Democrat candidates getting elected in Texas, in Alabama for that matter, in a statewide Senate race. So, it really is this trend of urban economic centers versus rural less affluent demographics in the country, this is the divide. It's no longer so clear in terms of geographic Mason-Dixon lines and this kind of thing. It's more about areas where the economy seems to be working well and areas where job growth, frankly, hasn't recovered, into what it was 40 years ago. And I think that's true in Connecticut, and I think it's that trend's true in the country. And we've got it, right here. And the Naugatuck Valley is a microcosm of that.
And then in terms of getting back to David for a second, I was, first of all, I thought Stefanowski was going to pull it out. I think some of that is probably because I get so much information and feedback from our Facebook page. I don't know, my views get a little, or not that I was voting either way for him, but I thought he was going to win. He lost. It wasn't a huge shock that he lost. But, man, I didn't think there was any way the Democrats would make the gains they did in the State House and the State Senate. What happened there?
I think from the Republican standpoint, we may have gotten a little bit too complacent. I always tried to tell people that, listen, this is not lock and key. This is not all said and done. Like, Connecticut is a blue state. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot more issues to press on. And I think despite how close it was, there was a lot more that we could have done, like on the inner cities, looking at those information technology jobs and infrastructure projects that people care about in those cities, even in the suburbs, talking about, cutting taxes and cutting regulations, or in the rural places so like farmers can grow and stuff like that. There was a lot more that could have been done from the Republican standpoint, and at the same time, the Democrats were very energized in this election cycle. I don't know if that's just coming from I think it's a mixture of Trump hatred and the fact that Connecticut is a blue state, but I have heard from a lot of people that nobody really expected Ned Lamont to be our governor come Wednesday morning. A lot of people expected that it was going to be Bob, and people have been saying for years now that, I go back as far as 2015 when people are saying, we got Malloy again. That means we're definitely going red in 2018. So I think Republicans really need to look at this as a reality check that we have a lot more work to do.
Democrat, I wouldn't say it was
Stephan Behuniak.
Sorry, I wouldn't say it was necessarily the enthusiasm as much as the organization. Democrats organized the hell out of the state everywhere, every corner. We campaigned for every seat that we thought we could win, and we won a lot of them. And the Republicans, to David's point, were a little complacent. I think a lot of Republican leaders have admitted as such. They ignored ground game in a lot of areas. They focused on buzzwords and just kind of fear.
Explain the difference as somebody who's not on the ground.
So campaigning really needs to be voter outreach and direct voter contact, and not this kind of broad brush taxes or just a
like
buzzword.
Playing the Chaz AJ clip over and over again.
Putting a right.
No, that's not.
No.
Absolutely. That was everywhere.
Time you went on YouTube.
Putting a thousand television ads is way less effective than knocking 1,000 doors. If you knock 1,000 doors, you're going to get much better results.
It's
and
true,
Republicans
that really is true.
Republicans don't grasp that.
Wait.
The primary.
Yeah,
wait,
Stefanowski.
hold on. Ethan, you just got nobody heard a word of that. What did you just say?
Stefanowski won the primary essentially by just putting a bunch of money into TV and internet ads, and came out of nowhere, didn't do any, pressing of the flesh, typical campaign moves that you do, and just came out of nowhere and took the Republican primary.
Well,
so
Stefanowski also got in there early, too.
Worked, right?
Stefanowski also got in there extremely early, and that was something that we reviewed on the Republican side of things. Stefanowski's TV ads were back on in, January of this year. He had the spotlight early. He was appealing to the Trump voters of Connecticut with this message of, I'm a businessman, I want to cut your taxes, and people instantly latched onto that. And by the time the other Republican primary candidates got involved, at that point, a lot of people's choice was decided.
Well, Stefanowski also had to win 30% of Republicans over with those TV ads to win the primary. To win the general, you have to win 50% of all voters in Connecticut, and it doesn't translate.
You guys want to move on now to some of the specific races that were in the Valley?
I just wanted to know. I agree with you. I agreed with you that I just thought Malloy was so hated that Stefanowski would win, but maybe it's a lot like you said, reading the comments from people on Facebook.
And I think that was the mindset of everybody. Everybody thought, well, Malloy is so hated, so it's guaranteed for the Republicans, but you can never look at a race as a guarantee. You always have to have in mind that there's the potential that you could lose. And something that we thought of is, what's the best case scenario? Republicans take the governorship, the House, the Senate, and pick up a couple, if not all, the under-ticket races. We also thought there was the worst case scenario, and that's that we lose everything. And unfortunately, that's what happened here.
Well, let me ask you, pursuant to that, there was Malloy at a press conference yesterday where he was, pretty much gloating, where he was saying, like, the Republican strategy was running against me, and I wasn't on the ballot, so that was a stupid strategy, and whoever hatched that should, give their salary back or whatever. So do you think that there should be a change of leadership in the Connecticut Republican Party?
Well, just to add on to that for a second as well, Democrats also did campaign on the strategy of, Republicans are all in for Trump. So it was a two-sided coin here. I don't think that was the primary reason. People didn't vote Republican just because they hated Malloy. Some of them, many of them probably did. Just like people didn't vote Democrat just because they hate Trump. Some probably did in that case. With regards to state leadership, there's a lot of evaluation that needs to be done. I think that the Republican State Central Committee needs to come together and have a strategy meeting to discuss where do we go from here. J.R. Romano has been leading the Connecticut Republican Party for quite some time now. I've gotten to know him well. I think he's a great leader, and whatever comes out of this, I think we need to have the best interests of Connecticut in mind.
Then Tarek, you were looking to jump in. You've got charts. You've got color-coded charts.
I got my research.
A lot of numbers.
Well, I think it's just interesting to note, where did Stefanowski and Lamont do well? I mean, I thought Lamont was going to do well in this election.
You thought he was going to win.
I thought he was going to win. Yeah, I thought he was going to win actually by a larger margin, which is why I actually thought Boughton would have been a better candidate for Republicans from the beginning statewide.
Given how turn your head that way, take the mic.
Given how close the margin was in this race, I bet that actually Boughton would have taken it, because he seems like comes across as a little bit more of a pragmatic, moderate type of candidate. There's a few people that I sort of within the state that I sort of use as a litmus test to sort of see where their politics are, or see where they're leaning, as an indicator. Sort of, I call them like Reagan Democrats, and especially within this community. Actually, it bucked the trend. I usually say that Ansonia would predict most elections, but in this case, it wasn't the case.
Ansonia was all over the place with this election.
Yeah. So, but I think for Stefanowski won Ansonia substantially. He won Ansonia, got 55% of the votes. He received more votes than any gubernatorial candidate within the last decade.
Wow.
So in Ansonia, so Lamont underperforming in Ansonia substantially, and so that I think that's interesting, and that just goes to show. People talk about the blue wave. This election was really put forward as Trump versus Malloy, in a sense, but really that wasn't that was true. I think in some parts of the state, the blue wave was sort of real in Connecticut, but it didn't really reach. It didn't get as far up the Naugatuck River.
That's it.
Well, the valley went pretty red for the most part, from what I looked at the map.
It was mixed. It was mixed. But it wasn't just inner cities that voted for Lamont. It was loads of areas within Fairfield County and the coastal areas. I think Kurt Miller alluded to the fact that there was a seat in Greenwich, a rep seat in Greenwich that was held by Republicans since 1912 that flipped and went blue. I mean,
yeah, there's a CT mirror thing called a blue wave. Actually, the blues got bluer, but the reds also got redder. That I think Miller was paraphrasing from.
Right.
But they went in and town by town analyzed the percentages in 2014 compared to 2018 and mapped it out. So if you're listening to this, go to ctmirror.org and you could see that visualization. It's interesting to look at town by town.
But what do you think happened in Ansonia? That's fascinating that Stefanowski was that popular. What's going on in Ansonia? Why did he turn on so many people as two guys who live in Ansonia and are deeply involved in the community? Whoever wants to go wants to take it.
Ansonia always, for any political scientists within our higher education institutions, come and research Ansonia, because I think we're probably the most interesting municipality in the state as far as politics are concerned. Again, voters in Ansonia proved to be discerning, all over the ballot again this election. This town does not vote party line. I think if you just sort of look down the line of all of the seats that were up for election here, I think sort of half of them went red and half of them went Democrat, more or less. So it was sort of like interesting. You read down the list. Ansonia voted Republican for governor, Democrat for U.S. Senate, Democrat for U.S. Rep, state Senate still
undecided.
I guess to be determined. Democrat for state rep, Secretary of the State. I mean, a statewide office like Secretary of the State for Denise Merrill came out pretty big, 53% of the vote. Treasurer. And then you got Kurt Miller doing pretty well in Ansonia, being in the neighboring town, won in Ansonia, and also the Republican Attorney General candidate won in Ansonia. So really, going back to what Stephan said, I think in the Valley, in Ansonia, there's that old adage, all politics are local. So much so the case here. The ground game in terms of making sure you have the right message and being able to get that message, not just through TV or online, but really talking to people face to face. In local politics, you can do that kind of thing, and that's exactly what happened here. And yeah, it's very interesting.
That's
just checking the numbers. Logan, I'm looking at the wrong year. Sorry.
I mean, also interesting.
Is it now neither guy won that race? What are you going to say?
I think Logan won comfortably enough that even if Cabrera is credited with those 200 something votes,
in Ansonia,
Logan will still have the
I think it's like 65. He's up by.
So it went up to like 160 something. Now they found more, but that was confusing me too because I remember it was 65. And then today I was reading an article that said it went up to 160 something.
65 is the entire 17th district. In just Ansonia, Logan won pretty comfortably.
Oh, you're saying right. For Ansonia, it wasn't even
Ansonia,
close. And that's what I mean. That 17th district.
Let's get to it.
Let's jump right into 17th.
Subject.
17th district. You've got Hamden, Beacon Falls. You've got Ansonia, part of Derby. You've got Bethany, Woodbridge. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
It's all of Derby, right?
Naugatuck.
Derby.
Yeah, that perfectly makes sense.
It's the 104th that's just part of Derby.
The Naugatuck Valley. So the Naugatuck Valley is the swing portion of that district. In that race, I hold true. It was true for Joe Crisco. It was true in this election. The Valley decided, ultimately, I guess still to be determined, but likely to decide that vote. He lost by, I think, close to 500 votes, Cabrera versus Logan in Ansonia. So he's having to make up a lot. Lost by bigger proportions in Naugatuck and in Beacon Falls. So, you can't make up all those votes, just in Hamden and Woodbridge alone. So, the Naugatuck Valley is increasingly relevant in statewide offices and certainly for the 17th Senate district race.
Do you think Cabrera, because one thing when I was talking to Chuck Pine after the results came in, and he was the campaign chairman for George Logan, the Ansonia Republican incumbent state senator for the 17th district, he said that Cabrera wasn't paying attention to the Naugatuck Valley, that his plan was clearly to go into Hamden where Logan got trounced. Is there any truth to that?
No, there's no truth.
Did it really appear here too much?
There's no truth to that. And I can say, I went around and knocked doors with Cabrera here. His people were on the ground. In any race, you're going to have to sort of make a tactical decision to some extent. You have limited resources at your capacity, limited volunteer capacity. You have to decide where you're going to spend your time. I believe that, and I'm speaking, just on my observation, not on behalf of any candidates or anything like that, that they spent more time in Hamden than they did in the Valley. I don't think that was they were present in Naugatuck Valley, maybe not as much so as they were in Hamden.
Did anybody think, going into that, I just assumed Logan was going to win easily because he is an incumbent. Of course, a first-term incumbent is always the most vulnerable, but I just know him from here. He's popular. The guy's everywhere. He's at every community event. and Cabrera was more of a newcomer. Was anybody? What are people's thoughts on that? How close that is?
Yeah,
we don't even know there's a winner. A couple of days later.
Yeah, we're still staying on the edge of our feet here. No, I think the race definitely took us by surprise. Like you said, Senator Logan is an incredibly popular senator representing our district. He's not one that just votes based on party lines. He's based on principles and practice, and I think that really resonates with the people of the Valley. To add to your point. From our perspective, we did try to make sure that Logan was all over the place representing the people, whether it be in Ansonia, Derby, Naugatuck, Camden, Woodbridge, wherever it might be. And that's something that we have to take into consideration now, looking back on this race, and whatever the results may be, is what were the dynamics of this race, what was turnout like. And that's something that I want to reiterate, is that the energy that came out from the Democratic Party in this election cycle is, I think, what made this race so close, which it's not really surprising for this race, because it was something that we expected, where Democrats will turn out, and it could end up putting Cabrera over, and it could end up making the race very close, and look exactly what happened.
Stephan Behuniak, you have any thoughts on the Cabrera-Logan race?
I guess my only thoughts would be, I don't think Logan is as popular as you would say he is if he can't win an election by more than a handful of votes. I will give him a lot of credit. He is present at more events than pretty much anybody I've ever seen in politics. But I think it was a well fought campaign. I think, like most Democrats, Cabrera had a better ground strategy than Logan, and I think that's where he found his votes.
But doesn't Logan have a good ground strategy by just being everywhere? Isn't that the whole voter outreach you're talking about?
Yes, that's one component of it.
That's not bad, but that's not everything. That's not dragging people to the polls. That's keeping your name out there, and there's a difference.
I mean, the other thing, though, that's, I think, important to note is, and I disagree with your statement on the partisan line. I mean, when he's campaigning, George Logan presents himself as an independent, really. But when you look at his votes, I mean, I don't know if anybody's got his voting record here, but it's been pretty consistently with the state party, as a whole. I don't see him as a maverick up there in any capacity. And
do you think that hurt him?
I think you need to listen to him more then.
I think it has hurt. I think his rhetoric is one thing, but his voting is another. And particularly, we had education funding in Ansonia is a big issue, and George Logan came out essentially on the opposite side. He had this rare circumstance where Mayor David Cassetti was standing next to Malloy in agreement on a rework of education cost sharing.
At the library a couple of years ago.
At the library a couple of years ago. And George Logan came out against that initiative, really threw Ansonia under the bus on that initiative in terms of funds that would have substantially helped Ansonia. And so I was surprised, actually, that Ansonia voted so substantially for Logan. And I think, out of the 17th, Logan got 54% of the vote, or 56% of the vote. I was surprised to see that he won so handily in Ansonia, given the fact that vote really shortchanged this district.
But that's his hometown, though.
That is the hometown.
Don't forget
dynamic
that is
here.
his
That is the
hometown.
hometown dynamic, and it's the fact that the work that Senator Logan has put forward, being a member of the Senate, has been beneficial towards Ansonia in terms of fighting for education funding. I believe he discussed this in one of the debates where one of the bills that was put forward was for $89 million in funding across the entire 17th district, and another was for $109 million, and he was advocating on that behalf. Now, there also are more components to that bill, obviously, but I think when people look at Senator Logan's voting record, it's consistently been fighting for our towns.
I guess you guys will disagree with this on George Logan's, white knightism, I guess, on behalf of Ansonia. But regardless of that, it was brought up in the debate that vote. That was like the first. I mean, I had known about it, but that was the first time I had heard about it publicly in the context of the campaign. So my question to you would be, like, why wasn't that made a bigger deal of, considering Logan won against Joe Crisco in 2016 by less than 1,000 votes, less than 1,000 votes. He should have had a statewide target on his back from the entire Democratic Party to oust him after his first term. So why wasn't there more of a push?
There was that effort. There was that effort that came in from the PACs. I got the mailers all the time from the democratically organized PACs regarding Logan's positions on several different issues, much like there was probably PAC mailers coming out against Cabrera. This race is not something where people knew Logan was going to win, and we still don't know what's going to happen. Praying for his victory, though. This is something where the 17th district is a battleground district, much like the 33rd district is. Many of the other senatorial districts are. This wasn't a guaranteed win.
And I guess looking at the history of this district, too, one thing I realized on election night, Joe Crisco held that thing for a couple of generations, right? Yeah. A Republican hasn't held it since 84, Ethan? Is that what we were saying?
No, you're thinking of the 104th.
I'm getting my Dud chick confused.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, how long was Crisco in there?
I don't know.
I thought it was 16 years.
Time,
I thought, I heard. I don't know.
So if you look, the last time that the Democrats won this seat was in 2010. They won with 60% of the vote. When Logan won 2014, he picked it up with 52% of the vote. I think what's also interesting is voter turnout. So we talk about energy, like energy and enthusiasm on the Democrat side. I think 100% in terms of volunteer activity. But we saw turnout increase both on the Republican and Democrat side. So you can see actually compared to 2014. So Logan won in 2014 with approximately 2,500 votes. He won
with 2016. You mean?
No, 2014.
Because I'm talking about
midterm election.
He wasn't running in 2014.
Yeah, this was his first term.
2016 was the first race.
Maybe I got my numbers wrong. So never mind on that point.
It probably was meant to be 2016.
So should we talk? I mean, it's interesting to bring up the education component, because then if you look at the Rochelle Yauman race where it's Ansonia Derby, I would assume that something like the Ansonia education controversy would have much more legs, for lack of a better word, in that race than Logan Cabrera, since like Woodbridge don't care, generally speaking. Were there any specific? And I mean, look at the Rochelle
Yauman voted for but he was directly involved in the budget cut. So yeah.
And it was an issue that was raised. Cara Rochelle had done. I guess going into it, I was thinking, okay, Cara Rochelle helped launch the Young Democrats of Naugatuck Valley, of which you guys are involved in. She sort of, not orchestrated, but she brought new blood into the Democratic Party in Derby, I know. But some people in that party are not fans of, such there was some anger over her because of whatever transpired in Derby and her sort of bringing in new blood to that party.
That's anywhere you go, though. Anytime somebody tries to bring new blood into a party, the old guard never likes that.
Well, Mayor Delgado and the Carmen DeCenzo split is specifically what I'm talking about.
Right.
There you had the Board of Aldermen there but at war with the mayor. And so there's a lot of...
All in the same party?
Yeah, everybody in the same party.
Where have we heard that before?
And she couldn't get elected to the tax board, is what I'm saying. And that's the knock we would hear.
Yeah.
She couldn't even get elected to the tax board.
I mean, in fairness...
Too liberal.
Rochelle spent a lot of her time in that campaign really working for the top of the ticket, Delgado, in that race. She really wasn't focused on winning her race.
Mm-hmm. And lost.
Delgado lost.
Yeah.
The 17th district is a dynamic district. It covers a wide range of municipalities with different economic circumstances. The 104th is concentrated, relatively small geography, densely populated area. The
assuming it's drawn correctly.
Yeah, exactly. But the economies of Ansonia and Derby are almost identical in terms of what the dynamic is there, and so I think there's an opportunity to hone your message specifically to the issues that are concerning your district, whereas the message within the 17th is going to vary widely, whether you're talking in Bethany or Woodbridge or Hamden or Ansonia. So in the 104th, you got Ansonia and Derby. You've got a working class community here. The issues that you're talking, you had education on the ballot. You had things like local economy, local economic opportunity. You had things like trains and transportation. You have cost of healthcare. In this community, you have this essentially the struggle of the American middle class taking place here. The Rochelle campaign was very much plugged into those issues in delivering that message and getting that message out. So well-organized, energetic campaign that really mobilized volunteers in a way to she was the second highest vote getter in Ansonia. Of all candidates that were on the ballot, Rochelle was the second highest vote getter.
What's your reaction to that? See, what I was trying to say before was that, there were some negatives coming into this, and the fact that she did what she did so handily is pretty amazing. So, David Papcin, what is your reaction to that race?
I mean, the only thing I could say is props to Kara. She worked her ass off. She's a hard worker. She's a go-getter. She campaigned on the issues, and that's not to say that Joe didn't. We essentially replicated the same exact strategy of this is how our positions, meaning Kara and Joe, how their positions would affect your life if they were your state representative. And I think Kara's positions definitely resonated with the people of Ansonia and Derby. I also think that you have to take a look at the dynamic of Ansonia, and just because we might have a Republican administration in office doesn't mean that we're a Republican city. We're a city that votes by conscience, by our conscience. We're people, or a town that votes based on the people that come to our door. It's not just that we're voting Republican just because we have a Republican administration. Ansonia, actually, our party registration is 7-1 Democrat over Republican. So a result like this, I mean, Linda Gentile's dead in 26.
Say it again.
Then?
Not 7-1.
Put that microphone closer.
It's approximately. I think it's close to.
I'll interrupt both of you and say that as of last November, it was 3,164 Democrats, 1,597 Republicans.
Okay.
Yeah.
4,057 unaffiliated.
Okay, so that's probably where
usually,
as
is usually the case. Unaffiliated.
Shout out to the unaffiliates.
Yeah.
But to your point,
whose point?
Whose point? Yeah.
David, both of David and Tarek's points. Going into this race, Yauman ran against Gentile 2 years ago. It was she won with 57% of the vote, and I thought, like, by the same principle of Miller running for state offices, like, that got his name out there to like the whole district. He's going to come back in 2018, run again. He's gonna do better. I thought he was going to run against Gentile. When Gentile announced her retirement, and it became Rochelle versus Yauman, I thought Yauman had it pretty much sewn up.
It was his to lose.
Then given the fact that Ansonia and Derby are now Republican administrations, given the trend in the recent election, but looking at the numbers from Tuesday, Rochelle got 56.9% of the vote, just less than Gentile in terms of percentage.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, to David's point, it appears that she just did work the district and get it done.
She did. She worked her ass off, like I said, and again, props to her for that. She campaigned well on the issues. Do you think
the education issue here in Ansonia hurt Mr. Yauman?
I think it definitely played into some people's votes. I think those people were pretty decided anyway on who they were going to be voting for, whether it been Democrat or Republican. But definitely some people were affected by that, and that just goes to show that there needs to be more education done on that issue.
And let me ask you this: Eugene just alluded to it a couple minutes ago. When the campaign first started, there was a Connecticut Post story that revealed that Kara didn't actually live in the 104th district. She lives across the street from it, essentially, I think is fair to say. At the time, Mr. Yauman said, "I don't plan to use this. I'm not going to go negative." The week before Election Day, the Ansonia GOP had a post saying, like, "Oh, she doesn't live in the district. How about that?" So why did you go negative, I guess, in the closing days?
I think that was a
campaign?
PAC mailer.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear the answer.
I mean, Joe really didn't have any input on that message. The Ansonia GOP was just there to advocate. No, it's actually true.
Although everybody brought it up downstairs that night.
Joe
Everybody was saying, "Oh, does this mean she's going to move into the district?"
I hope she moves into the district.
Why not bring
Come to Ansonia. She's more than welcome to Ansonia. I hope she comes to Ansonia.
And then it was brought up, so that's why I was asking the question.
Oh, wait a second. You hope she moves to Ansonia instead of Derby?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Start showing her places.
It's most of the districts of 104th.
Yeah, I believe she.
No, it's just a rivalry between Ansonia
she already
and
has
Derby.
a place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Cool.
Say that again.
She already has a place. She's had it since she found out about the
in
issue.
Derby or Ansonia?
Ansonia.
All right. Well,
she took care of it immediately.
Yeah.
Cool.
Ansonia, huh?
That's supposed to mean
this podcast.
Eugene feels slighted.
Well, what I don't get is I got
Bears
knocking
fan.
on my door when I'm all hungover is
jeez.
Nicole Clarius Dietra. I'm like, what is Seymour doing representing me on Hawthorne Avenue? Who drew that district?
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
I will say, as a
Nothing against.
I'm
Nicole.
certainly not a neutral observer, but I'm not somebody who lives in the district. I will say that whole issue was dirty from the get go. I believe, and David,
Dirty?
I think it was dirty. I believe.
How do you pass that up though?
I believe the issue was known well before it came out, and I'm sure David will refute that. But I believe, and many people believe it was known before it came out.
We asked the town repeatedly if she lived in the
Well,
district.
when she
they all
first
said, yeah,
announced,
yeah,
like
yeah.
the actual documents from the registrars, the street by street lists would have shown her address being in the district.
Oh, correct. But
Yeah.
I think that this it was a political move to release it when it was released. I think because it was released by the
Well,
Republican town chairman of Derby, and I
It was
believe
a Mike Mako, a Connecticut Post Mike Mako story.
Oh, that's a shock. But
The extent.
yeah. But anyways, and then of course to say, hey, we're not going to make an issue of this, and then it was an issue right before the election. That's a dirty move, but it's that's politics, I guess.
On the brighter side,
just to add on to that, speaking for myself, I found out about that like when this story came out. So
No, the Republican chairman in Derby, I believe, is the culprit of the dirtiness in that regard.
I can't comment on that because I don't know.
on a brighter note, though, something super exciting about this race is the turnout figures. Both parties really,
Hold that microphone a little
both
closer.
parties garnering significantly more votes than the last midterm election in the state rep race, specifically, which I think is, being the
Incoming
registrar
registrar
of
of
voters elect, will make us happy. And Ansonia is approximately 15% higher in 2018 election than it was in the 2014 midterm election.
Wasn't it like 67% voter turnout in Ansonia?
67% versus 51%
Yeah.
in 2014. So big jump,
That's pretty consistent with the statewide numbers.
Yeah. We were slightly higher than the state. So good, well done, Ansonia residents, on getting out to vote. I mean, Democrats still have this issue of Republicans will go out to vote, and it's actually interesting if you look at the U.S. Representative race, Rosa DeLauro versus Cadena. His vote totals in the presidential election in 2016 were almost identical to his midterm election. So that's how reliable the Republican votes were.
That's amazing.
On that side, whereas Rosa loses like 3,000 votes within Ansonia alone between the 2016 presidential election versus 2018. So the Democrats still got to do a lot better job turning out those presidential Democrats, as we call them, the ones that only come out for presidential races.
Let me ask you that. Pursuant to that, let me ask you that.
What are you trying a case, counselor?
At Kara's election night victory party, I talked to Beth Lynch, former town clerk in Ansonia. She's been around city politics for a long time, and she was saying this shows Ansonia's turning back blue. People are paying more attention. Paying attention to what's going on at City Hall, sort of alluding to the school funding fight. Do you agree? Do you think it's trending in the right direction for Dems?
mean, Beth has witnessed politics in Ansonia for much longer than I have, but it's hard to say that when you have Stefanowski winning, by 600 votes in Ansonia, winning so dominantly. When you have Senator Logan winning so dominantly in Ansonia, it's hard to say that we're turning blue. I think what it says, which is pretty, from my short-term observation, is that Ansonia voters are discerning, and they will not vote across the line. They will discern between candidates across parties, and it really matters how much you show up and bring your full game. And that's really what. But I will say that it's that victory has energized the party. It has, through this election, we have garnered support and enthusiasm among a solid core of Democrat volunteers, new people coming into the party. Really, actually, it started in the election of last year. The municipal election, where I was running against Mayor Cassetti, lots more people coming into the party. And then this really throughout this campaign, it's revved up
Are you going to run for mayor again?
Undecided at this point.
Thought I could sneak that in there. Well, should we now switch to the town of Seymour?
Sure.
Where, the thing we should note about all this, we're talking about, Democrats, but like the Republicans have an iron fist, an ironclad grasp on Shelton. And then they had like massive turnout, right?
Shelton went very heavy red turnout.
And then heavy. Seymour.
That's just the way they're trending, I feel, though.
Sure. Yeah, I want to give a little context that from what I see.
Because I don't think Nicole Kleider's teacher really didn't have an opponent this time. I mean, she did, but I didn't.
Yeah, there was some.
I didn't know that until I read it in the Citizen News.
Kevin McDuffie was running.
Kevin McDuffie was running
the Democrat candidate.
So I have obviously some thoughts about Seymour, and I haven't done my full analysis yet. But jumping off the page at me is the fact that more people voted red in Seymour than they have even in any of the most recent elections, which have all gone red to varying degrees. But if we're being honest here, Seymour is in a tough place for these kind of elections. We have 2 Senate districts in Seymour, which is crazy. And we're on the absolute outskirt of both. We don't even have a land border with the 21st, which is, we have a part of that district. And then the 32nd district is 2/3 of Seymour, and that district encompasses Bridgewater, Bethlehem, Roxbury, a lot of towns
that all over the place.
I would say towns that like 85% of people who live in Seymour have never even been to / heard of.
How do you so if I live in Seymour,
where Dustin Hoffman lives, though,
right? Yeah.
So there's no. It's got to be hard to build interest in these races.
Yeah. So
who represents me?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And the 32nd district is about as Republican a district as there is in the state. The 21st isn't far behind. The 105th has traditionally been a swing district, our rep district. But like you said, we had a candidate on the Democratic side who didn't run the kind of ground campaign that's necessary to make a big splash. And quite frankly, the most popular Republican that perhaps exists in the Valley holds that seat right now in Nicole. So the odds were, the deck was stacked against
Nicole.
us. And then you add that to the fact that Kurt is on the ballot, and that drives people to the polls in a big way. And then even add more on top of that, the Democrats, the buck stops with me, but the Democrats, we ran very little campaigning in Seymour. I would say we knocked about 1,000 doors this year total, which is way down from where we need to be. A lot of our most loyal volunteers actually worked on Kara's campaign. We had people working on Monica Brill's campaign, who was running for the 21st as well. But the focus for that race couldn't really be on Seymour because there's only 2,000 or 3,000 votes in Seymour for that campaign. So we, the numbers were bad for Democrats. If you look at it, we were like the 16th highest state for Stefanowski in terms of percentage, town rather, like 15th, 16th highest for Stefanowski. But I think, Kurt being on the ballot, Nicole being on the ballot with a weak challenge, and just the fact that the Democrats we didn't do the groundwork there. I think that's the biggest contributor to those numbers.
Now, as a citizen of Seymour, do you think, kind of like how Ansonia goes, do you think people just vote based on party lines, or do you think they vote based on the person?
No, I don't think there's a lot of communities where people vote straight on party lines. There's a lot of people who vote straight on party lines all over the place, but communities don't necessarily go party lines. There's so many unaffiliated voters. Unaffiliated voters outnumber.
Shelton is one, though, right?
Right. Well,
Shelton's pretty consistently red.
Right. Well, think about the main vote getter in Shelton. It's somebody who's been there 30 years and hardly ever faces any kind of challenge.
I tried to vote the straight working families line. not all the candidates.
Alarm started going on.
Not all the races had candidates. So.
But
all two of them.
Dumped in the river.
I think to the point that we get back to a little bit with the 104th, people, especially at the local level, vote issues. Whether the Republican or the Democrat has the issues they like, that's the person that a big swath of people will go for. And I think people take a lot of pride in splitting tickets. Even Democrats and Republicans, they love saying, "Hey, I don't always vote for my guy."
I split my ticket, damn it.
And this is something that probably gets me in a lot of trouble with Democrats. I've split my ticket in some capacity almost every single year I voted, and I'm the leader of the Democrats in Seymour, so I don't always go for our guy necessarily.
Listen, I'm the same with the Republicans on the issues. I go either way on the issues depending on how I feel.
But again, all politics is local. People like splitting their
all
ticket.
tired.
So if you find somebody who's going to put in the work and is going to advocate for the issues you care about, I think that can transcend party lines a lot of times.
So all politics are local. Let's get local. Let's get dirty local.
Oh, dear Lord.
Charter.
I don't like where this is going. Okay, good. You saved it there.
Seymour charter revision.
All right, everyone turn the podcast off now, please.
There's nothing dirtier than a giant
was
ball of
something-
oil.
Okay,
in the
I'm a
Seymour
little bit
Charter
ignorant
revision.
towards this. What is going on there?
Sure, I can give you a quick rundown.
Well, it's routine charter revision. It's
So
it's just-
every community, to my knowledge, has a charter, basically the constitution of the town. Basically everybody kind of knows what a constitution is. So incrementally, you update the charter. We're not like America, where a document 250 years ago is good enough, and we're just going to leave it at that. We are, we try to continually update our document, and the process that happens is any changes to the charter have to go before the voters at referendum.
Right. Hey, listen, if somebody's listening to this podcast an hour in, they know what charter revision is.
Oh, for sure.
So you had what?
Sure.
You had like 16,000 questions, though. But like question one was 19 questions.
we had 8 questions, and question 1 consisted of 6 individual questions that our town attorney.
I guess we're burying the lead. People voted no on some things you thought were very sound, basic.
People did some very, to be politically correct, strange things in the voting booth this year, and I think.
Yeah, what are some of them?
Sure. Number 1.
Oh boy.
Number 1.
This is good.
On question number 6. This is a question.
We're getting into the fun
This is
part
a question that dealt with: shall the town charter be amended to fix grammar mistakes, typos, just procedural things?
Yeah.
Basically fixing periods,
Right.
making sure male female descriptors line up. Things that simple.
Right. And like the Ansonia Charter at one point. Oh, no,
Right.
no. It was the
there-
planning and zoning had something like no drunks or whatever. It had all these
Sure.
weird terms.
Things like
it's
that.
very
So
basic.
we had 1,095 people from the humble town of Seymour that came out and voted no for that. I mean, I genuinely, without passing judgment, would like to hear from somebody who voted no, and I'd like to hear why, because it doesn't make a lick of sense to me right now. Perhaps as somebody who was involved in the process for the last year, intimately, and I helped write these questions, I don't get it.
And I'm joking a little bit, but these were things that people worked on for a full year,
I think
like
a lot of people,
3 times a week or whatever.
Nobody understands, and it's not necessarily their fault, but nobody understands that the Charter Revision Commission is a 9-member body of volunteers with the town attorney with them the whole step of the way. These people met 2 to 3 times per month since the beginning of 2018. With constant input and feedback from the Board of Selectmen, 7 people, volunteers. And we came up with things that we really thought would have broad appeal. Not all of these 8 questions we thought would have broad appeal. There was a couple that we were trying to get a pulse of the community.
Town manager.
Right, town manager, for example. Term limits was one. And this is another fascinating one to me. We had a question on the ballot where shall the town increase the first selectman's term to 4 years and institute term limits together. We all got together and said we don't want to do one without the other. 2 years just isn't enough to be effective. Kurt will talk about this all the time. I will agree with him 100%. We're on opposite sides of a lot of issues, politically, but on this one we're lockstep. The first 6 months you're trying to figure out what to do, try to get your feet wet. The last year you're running for re-election, so you may not want to do something controversial that needs to be done. So you really have 6 months of effective leadership during those 2 years. If you move that out to 4 years, you give a first selectman time to set their agenda, do what they need to do, and then in 4 years, the voters have a real opportunity to take a thorough look at what they've done.
It's more like a full-time job. In
Yeah,
2 years,
it is a full-time job. It's an absolutely full-time job.
When you do it in 2 years, it's
2
kind of
years,
like
it's like, and I think the same thing about Congress people. I think the same thing about our state legislators. 2 years is not enough time to make effective, tough decisions.
Completely agreed.
It's just not.
Yeah.
But we
Seymour's
wanted
no.
The voters disagree, though.
But we
voters.
wanted to do that and couple it with term limits, because you see in a lot of communities where somebody gets in and then name recognition carries them to long terms, and it's not always justified. Sometimes it is, a lot of times it's not. But it's always good to see I think it's always good to see new leadership after a certain period of time. Even Kurt would say 12 years, which is what we were proposing as a maximum, is enough time to complete everything that you'd like to do and then get out of the way for somebody else to take over. Voters said
just for the first selectman?
Just for the first selectman. Voters said no to that in a very tight margin, actually, less than 200 votes out of about 7,000. Yet, we had an advisory question at the end, question 8, which was for general term limits on all elected boards, and that passed 5-1.
So is the first selectman included in that?
What happens to anything that passed? I didn't even ask that.
So questions 7 and 8. 7 was the town manager question, and that failed.
Was that a trick question?
The town manager question?
No. The fact that if the first selectman is included in that second question.
It was not. We honestly, I think we all believed that the first selectman question would pass fairly comfortably. We all were kind of marching to that tune. And I'm not speaking for everybody, I guess, but I think everybody who recommended it, including the full Charter Revision Commission and the Board of Selectmen, there was some minor disagreements, but I think it went 6-1 on Board of Selectmen to include that question. So we all thought it was going to pass. But then you look at the general term limits, and that one, nobody was really sold on it. We were kind of like, hey, let's see where the town is. So it's a non-binding question. That doesn't go into effect overnight. That's something the town will now study and try to figure out the feasibility of it. But it's tough to ignore a 5-1 vote on anything. So even if you're not, it would be prudent of leadership to take a real close look at this, because it is 5-1 in the town. But the flip side is what people are voting for, and they may not understand, is that we have a hard time on some of the lower boards finding people to run.
Getting people in there, yeah.
And we have an even harder time finding qualified people to run on some of these boards. We couple this with the fact that the town overwhelmingly supported keeping the Planning and Zoning Commission as an elected board, which I would argue is kind of a hodgepodge of people who don't really know what they're doing on that board right now. And I'm sorry to those people on the board, but you need
Chris Bowen.
Well, he's no. But even Chris Bowen has no planning and zoning training, but he's a diligent worker and he's learning his ropes, and that's great. But there's a lot of people, they're just average civilians, and they throw their name on the ballot because it's an elected position, and they win. And we don't. It's not necessarily we have experts, so we have to have a town engineer.
It's a technical position,
and the town, and the town planner and attorneys hand-holding the entire time, because a lot of these people don't know what the statutes are, and they don't know what they can or can't do, and that's not a fault to those people. It's just a fault of the system. Yeah. So we have people who are overwhelmingly saying, let's keep this an elected position, but let's put term limits on them. So if we do find somebody who knows exactly what they're doing and is going to be a great asset to the town, they got to go after a certain amount of time. So there's a lot of contradictory.
There's like term limits on surgeons. That's the common.
Absolutely not.
I was kind of bewildered on some of these things. There was just a lot of interesting results. And just not to get too deep into this, I'm just going to make one last point. Question 4 was about the annual town meeting and if we can get rid of it. Now, this went down 4,300 votes to 1,900 votes. People came out no. I don't think in the history of us having town meetings we've had 1,900 people total cumulatively.
Yeah. If
we've been having a town meeting since the 1850s when we were incorporated as a town, I don't think a grand total of 1,900 people have shown up to the meeting. I can tell you that Kurt read his presentation to me last year, in me alone.
Did you hold
literally
hands? And I'm
disappointing. Like, I'm an elected people would get involved.
I'm an elected official in the town, and I was the closest thing to public that there was. People don't show up. They don't come, but they come out and they vote almost 4-1 to keep the town meeting in place. Why are you keeping it in place if you don't show up? And it's just a thing that moves the budget to referendum where you get to vote on it anyways. So I don't get it. I want somebody to kind of explain to me what their thinking is.
Is that just pretty much because nobody's paying attention to charter revision at all? I know when we write articles about it.
Yeah, right.
Well, I remember in Ansonia a couple years ago there was a proposal to reduce the number of wards. They did a bunch of other things. And we were getting letters every week, vote yes on this, vote no on this, etc. Like, I don't remember getting one letter about the... No, Kurt Miller came in here once and talked about it, but it didn't seem like people were trying to make
should have campaigned on that, Stephan.
We're trying to make people aware of it. So I think that maybe that
just comes down to voter education, though. Right. Like, even with the statewide questions, not a lot of people knew what they were talking about.
But the statewide questions both passed overwhelmingly, and I don't think I could find 5 people in the state that understood the second question. right? The question about public lands. They don't understand the full ramifications of
Yeah.
it. Because, like, I didn't really understand it until I had a state rep explain it to me thoroughly, you know? But with that said about the charter revision thing, I don't know how the town can do a better job. The town needs to somehow do a better job of educating the public, but I don't know how they could, because we had many public hearings on the issue. We had about 6 to 8 Board of Selectmen meetings that touched on the issue. And then the Charter Revision Commission, I didn't go back and look, but met somewhere between 20 and 40 times. And all of those meetings are open to the public. Every single one of them.
Did they send out an index card?
They didn't, but you know, so we have people. We have people voting no on a grammar issue, and maybe that's because they don't think the town should spend money fixing that. Yet it would cost probably $15,000 to send like a mailer out to everyone in the town to give them an education. So I don't know if people want that. What do people want? We have to figure that out.
You're creating a base by doing that. Sorry.
Yeah, we just have to figure out a better way to engage the voters. I actually talked to one of the poll workers at one of the locations, and they told me that as many as like 30 to 50 people actually had problems with their ballots because there were so many questions. There was people who literally took their ballots, threw it on the ground, and walked out of the polling place.
That was my only thing I was thinking. If there were so many questions on there, nobody likes to read.
Right, but it's a problem with the state charter. The state charter tells us that we have, or the state statutes.
Like 2 on there. Make it just limit it to 2 questions.
But you can't do that because people complained about the first question had too many parts to it. So it's
that was
whatever you do, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. People are going to complain about it either way.
It's a difficult.
That's what Facebook's
we
for.
have to find a balance. This has been put on the town's Facebook page. This has been put on the town website. We had 3 to 4 dozen meetings about this, and nobody showed up to give their 2 cents. But then the voters come out and have these astounding totals, and we just have to figure out where the disconnect is.
Did you ever hear people talking about these questions behind the scenes? That's disappointing.
A lot of people actually that I know came up to me and asked me when they realized these questions were going to be on the ballot. Typically in the last 2 to 3 days before election day, when
that's
people
not good,
started doing their research, and then I tried to lay it out for them. And the people I talked to, I think, by and large, would have voted yes to almost everything because we made these in mind that people would vote yes at least to the binding questions. We figured all the binding questions would be a slam dunk, and it wasn't really close.
I wonder if part of it is because we've covered I know Derby charter revision, but there's no controversy. I hate to say it, and I think that's what the only thing that gets people to pay attention to charter revision.
You're probably right.
If you're trying to sneak something,
you got to be more controversial.
But that's in Ansonia. In Ansonia, there was the ward reduction. That was like the hot button.
Something
that did get a lot of people talking.
I think combining the town and Board of Ed budgets. I'm shocked that came as close as it is to passing.
It was a 16 votes. Which
I thought that would have gone down more than anything.
16 votes.
That's within the realm of a mandatory recount. So
is that in the charter?
I'm not necessarily advocating for a recount, but I think that we might want to look at the results again. But you're right. That's such a hot button issue, and nobody really paid attention because had that gone into play, maybe when people realized that it was happening when they went to vote for the next budget and they saw only one question, I think we would have been inundated with people freaking out about that it changed. But that's an interesting one to me.
On this issue,
they're all interesting to me. Every single one of these was interesting to me.
Ansonia was supposed to be taking up the issue of potentially separating the education budget from the city budget. So what was, and you guys are doing you proposed doing the exact opposite. Yeah. So what was this? So what's the theory?
So there's always a faction of people who believe that the budgets should be the opposite way that they are voted on because they want them to either pass or fail, and they believe that the other way will make it work. So that's a motivator for some people. Our motivation for trying to combine the budgets had been combined at one time, and then we changed them to separate, and now we wanted to go back to combined. And our reasoning for that was we've made great efforts to kind of streamline the town and Board of Education and try to not make them at odds. You see some towns where they're at odds. I'm not sure which towns necessarily, but some of them. And we don't want that, and we want to share services as much as we can. We've made great strides towards hiring people at the director level who can serve a role for both the town and Board of Education so that we're not paying too big salaries for half the work. And we're doing a great job in some of those things, and we thought that combining the budgets would be a way to try to limit some of the vilification of one side or the other, and just present like a unified front as a town. That's something Kurt was big on, and I supported him on that as well. I'm sure it wasn't popular with everybody. I don't know who voted which way, but
the land of steady
we'll
habits.
have to figure it out.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like it's a town where a zero increase school budget was voted down a few years ago.
Yes.
So, like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, back when it was.
We haven't had that problem.
some fiscal conservatives.
Yeah,
that
we haven't had that problem in a while.
Yeah.
And now, thank God, we haven't had that problem because we don't need any more ECS funding cut from us. We've suffered enough. And I hear Ansonia complaining about the state funding, and then you look over at Seymour, and we've lost multiple millions of dollars.
Listen,
And
this is a widespread issue.
Yeah.
It's not just a
Yeah.
one size fits all
So,
thing.
Yeah, we had a tough blow from the state. But that's it. We've probably taken way too much time on the Seymour Charter revision.
I don't think so.
fascinating,
No,
I thought that was
yeah.
the most interesting conversation, to be quite honest with you.
All right. Well, what I'll do is I'll cut out Miller's intro, and we'll just
Yeah, we can-
15 minutes,
we can get rid of that. We don't.
and
need that.
it'll all Seymour Charter revision. All right, guys. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Unless there's some burning question or comment, or something buried in Tarek's charts there that you wanted to bring up. Other than that, I guess we'll call it a day. David Papcin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tarek Raslan, Stephan Behuniak,
Thank you.
Ethan Fry. This is Eugene Driscoll. See you next time.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding, TV sucking ideas from our head, public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur, yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the opens each day. Online clickbait, a prurient way. It's free information here to stay. Not even hookers give it away. Advertising, metastasizing, newsroom shrinking, constant attrition. We'll ride the dinosaur. We'll ride the dinosaur. Dinosaur. Deadlines, bylines, pictures too. An editorial comment for a buck or two. Fire down the block, the murder next door. And now we wonder what it's all for. Social media coming free to you, funny pages, the mayor's wages, criminal seats, corruption schemes, ink state wretches asking tough questions. We'll ride the dinosaur, yeah, ride the dinosaur. The presses are running all through the night. We're printing the truth with all of our might. We're platform agnostics, got that interweb too. Buy an ad, see what we can do. We still have subscribers, still have our fans. We're here every day, so give us a chance and we'll make an art stand. Just hold us in your hand, and we'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. you.